My talk today is about my personal experience with long COVID, how running has impacted my recovery, and how incredibly important a vegan diet is to improve COVID outcomes at an individual level and at a population level. The last 9 months have probably been the strangest for most of our lives so far, but for me, it's really challenged my view of myself and my body. I got COVID in mid-March, and I'm not used to getting ill. I didn't expect to have a bad reaction. I only had a high temperature for a day, and I didn't even stay in bed on that day. My worst symptom while I was infected was the complete loss of taste and smell. At that time, of course, I had no idea that I would be suffering post-viral symptoms worse than these initial symptoms months later. I just didn't expect it. I'm in my 20s. I'm pretty healthy. I follow a whole food, plant-based vegan diet. I've been a runner for years. And at that time that I got COVID, I was running half marathons pretty much weekly. I cycled everywhere. I just thought there's no way I could get so ill. And I was very, very wrong. Doing exercise was just making me feel so much worse. And I didn't really understand why or how this was possible. As runners do, I just kept going. And I went back to my marathon training schedule that I was doing before COVID. I pushed through the symptoms. No, we didn't really know that long COVID was a thing then still. There were some people that were talking about the long-term symptoms, but it wasn't really very well known. But in July, the fatigue was getting so bad, I just had to rein it in. I had to reduce my training load. And then it was too late by then. I got injured because I just couldn't recover properly anymore. But why was all this happening to me? The worst part was feeling that I should be doing better. I'm a nutritionist. And not only that, I'm a nutritionist for runners. I didn't personally know anyone else suffering as much as I was. And especially in those months, we hadn't heard much about long COVID. To figure out what I should do with my diet and how the heck I was going to recover, first we need to understand what's going on. So I'm sorry, guys, it's going to be a tiny bit of biochemistry, but I'll explain it all. Several studies have found that people with certain genotypes are more susceptible to suffering severe symptoms and suffering from long COVID. And unfortunately, it turns out that I have pretty much the worst genetic combination when it comes to COVID susceptibility. And it all affects this system which controls our blood pressure and inflammation in our body. So your blood pressure is controlled by a hormone called angiotensin. And there's two hormones, angiotensin 1, which is inactive, and angiotensin 2, which is active. It increases vasodilation, which constricts your blood vessels and increases your blood pressure. When you need to increase your blood pressure, your body converts angiotensin 1 into angiotensin 2. And when you need to reduce your blood pressure, your body breaks down the excess angiotensin 2. To break it down, your body uses an enzyme called ACE2. You may have heard of ACE2 because it's how COVID gets into our bodies. So it's been talked about quite a lot recently. So ACE1 is the enzyme which converts angiotensin 1 into angiotensin 2. That's the one that increases blood pressure. And ACE2 is the enzyme that reduces our blood pressure and calms everything down again. I have the genes which increase both ACE2 and ACE1 levels. And high ACE2 levels is actually quite a good thing under normal circumstances. It results in lower blood pressure than average, lower levels of inflammation. This is really great for runners. But then higher levels of ACE2 when it comes to COVID is also a very bad thing. You may already know this, but the reason this is because COVID binds to ACE2 to get into your cells. So the more ACE2 receptors you have around your body, the faster COVID can get into your cells of all your organs before your immune system can get rid of it. And the problem is that ACE2 is expressed throughout your whole body. So you have these receptors pretty much on all of your organs, which is why COVID can cause so many different symptoms and affect so many different parts of your body. And the biggest problem is that when the COVID binds to ACE2, the enzyme can't do its job anymore. It gets degraded, and there's something called ACE2 shedding, which means basically your ACE2 levels drop significantly. And this is kind of good because it means no more no more of the COVID virus can get into your cells, but it's bad because, you know, you can't control your blood pressure anymore. You can't control your inflammation levels anymore. So usually this part of the diagram that shows, you know, when we have ACE2, it has neuroprotective effects, it's anti-inflammatory, it's antioxidative. We don't have that anymore. We only have all the other stuff, which is inflammation, oxidative damage, neurological damage, vascular dysfunction. And this all leads to the cytokine storm that we've heard so much about with COVID. On top of that, the inflammation from the cytokine storm further activates ACE1, which further increases your blood pressure. And it's just a vicious cycle that it's almost impossible to get out of. And then in August, a new study found that even athletes who were confirmed cases of COVID, but were asymptomatic, were suffering very strange heart damage weeks after the virus had gone. And these guys hadn't even had symptoms from COVID. And suddenly it's all over the media, you know, we're warned not to exercise if you've had COVID, which kind of went against the original advice of exercising to improve your immune response and improve your health and stuff. So I significantly reduced my running volume in July and August. Exercise increases ACE1 and inflammation. This is because an acute rise in blood pressure actually helps pump your blood around your body while exercising. And acute inflammation while you're exercising also helps your muscles repair. Usually this will go back down after exercise. But when you have had COVID and when you have this imbalance, your body can't reduce the inflammation after exercise. It can't reduce your blood pressure. On the chart on the right, you can see that compared to walking, marathon running significantly increases chronic inflammation. It increases stress hormone levels, which can cause damage in large amounts. And it inhibits proper immune function and regulation. It turns out that, surprise, surprise, a healthy plant-based diet is extremely important for recovering from COVID and long COVID. And the things to reduce are, of course, saturated fat, salt, sugar, and omega-6, which are all relatively high on a normal omnivorous diet. Reducing saturated fat is extremely important because saturated fat increases ACE1 levels, which increases blood pressure and adds to the stress of the body post-COVID. And of course, the foods highest in saturated fat are meat, dairy, and other refined oils. The other thing is that salt also increases blood pressure by activating ACE1. So reducing salt intake is also probably a good strategy to counteract the effects of this ACE1-2 imbalance. But to counter that, we also need to increase potassium. Sodium and potassium have to be balanced in the body to manage blood pressure. And as well as that, consuming specific polyphenols, quercetin, resveratrol, curcumin. These are extremely important for combating the oxidative stress and reducing inflammation. And although I was already following a relatively healthy vegan diet, I started focusing a lot more on these fruits and vegetables. Eating chocolate was definitely not something I had a problem with. So at the peak of my symptoms, which was around June, July, August, I was also taking a lot of supplements to control my body's immune response and inflammation levels. I knew that was because my genetic makeup, I wasn't going to be able to tackle the effects of this virus alone. For one, I have a reduced genetic ability to produce glutathione, which is our body's chief antioxidant. It's incredibly important for tackling oxidative stress. So I was taking quite a few supplements to support glutathione production. And another one we're hearing a lot more about is vitamin D, which is incredibly important to reduce inflammation. And studies show that vitamin D may be critically involved in regulating the cytokine storm and improving the outcome of COVID-19, both before and after. I also doubled my DHA dose to combat inflammation, which is omega-3. I was taking vitamin K to control blood clotting, which is dysregulated after COVID. and I took a probiotic to improve my gut symptoms, which is another side effect of ACE2 shedding in the intestines. There's also a few medicinal mushrooms and herbs like lion's mane and bacopa, which have been shown to significantly reduce oxidative damage, especially in the brain. I realized how important these were after my neurological symptoms started in June, July time as well. But this is just to show you how all of these things fit together in the context of COVID. So after 3 months of no running, I'm slowly getting back into it. 10 months ago, I was doing like 50 to 100 kilometers per week. And now I'm lucky if I do 2 5K runs in a week. I'm also significantly slower, and it's really hard work, but slowly with the really anti-inflammatory diet and with all the help from the supplements, it's starting to work. A healthy plant-based diet, vegan diet, rich in antioxidants, polyphenols, potassium, carotenoids, and low in saturated fat, sugar, salt, omega-6 is not only important to improve your immune system and protect you from COVID and other viruses, it's also extremely important to manage the cytokine storm and other long-term COVID symptoms. But why are we not hearing more about following a vegan diet to help manage COVID? I really, really hope more people will realize how important diet is, and we'll start hearing more about the positive promotion of a plant-based diet as a preventative strategy and a recovery strategy, instead of what we currently hear about, which is the amount of deaths, the hospitalizations, the isolating and all of that, which of course is also important, but it doesn't help in the long term.